The end of Hearthstone is coming. And yes, I am making a pun about the words Audio Apocalypse, but I really do believe that this legendary card right here, Elite Tauren Champion, 5 mana, 5/5 Finale, start a rock duel, but players must spend all of their mana each turn or else they take 8 or more damage. And well, what exactly does this mean for the player that's going to be taking damage? The best way to explain this card is that you are essentially enabling a game of hot potato with Hearthstone, where at the end of each turn, you explode for 8 damage if you did not spend all of your mana. But if you do spend all of your mana, you essentially swap it over to the opponent, and then they have the card once they start spending mana. That's how this works. Like, the card will stay in the player's hand until the other player actually starts spending mana, so that way you don't have to worry about cards like getting milled or something like that. That is an intentional design by the devs, and here's a tweet kind of explaining it. But you're essentially enabling a game of hot potato, and I think the hilarious thing about this is that the player who immediately runs out of cards first, or the player that somehow is just not able to synergize their cards properly because the numbers just don't add up, and that's something that I think is really hilarious about this card. But the hardest thing about Elite Tauren Champion is just being able to get the finale. But if you play it on turn 5, boom, immediate hot potato game. And that's just one of the many cards that have been announced from Hearthstone Audio Apocalypse, and I think that everything about this is just extremely flavorful, and you have to give it for the devs, just for the sheer flavor and the design of these cards. It screams music, and now that the festival's been going on too long, they are enabling a mini set where it's a bunch of cards that are trying to stop the show. No matter what you say, I think that's flavorful in my eyes. Hey guys, Editor Clark here. I just wanted to quickly say that about 70% of you guys that watch the channel are actually not subscribed to it, and I just wanted to quickly say that if at least 1% of you guys like and subscribe to this channel, then we can get that number to 69%, and yeah, 69. Okay, let's get back to the video. Not all the cards have been released so far, but a decent amount of them have, and I just have to speak on a few of the interactions that I am personally looking forward to, and a lot of them do include the ETC, as you can see by these tweets up here. But regardless, let's just go ahead and take a look at some of the cards that have already been released. I'm going to try and stick with the order that they started in. But now that I'm out of the way, let's go ahead and take a look at some of these warrior cards, because this weapon is a little bit interesting. If you guys remember the unidentified cards, like Unidentified Maul and I think Unidentified Elixir, some of these cards are reminiscing very similarly with these, these cards' designs. Case in point, there is a 2-mana card where it's just a 2-mana 2/2 warrior weapon, but it changes abilities each turn you hold on to it. So it can become, discover a taunt minion. It can become a weapon that can deal cleave damage. It can become a weapon that can gain armor, or it can become a weapon that gains +2 attack. So a 4/2 weapon, pretty decent in aggro. Gaining 5 armor can be kind of good in control. But the biggest thing about this weapon is just the fact that it's 2 mana. So you can go this into Weapons Expert on turn 3 and immediately make this into a 3/3. So there is some potential for this card, maybe in control, or maybe in an aggressive warrior deck. But taking a look at some of the other warrior cards, there are some concerning synergies that we might have to keep our eyes on for, balance reasons, and I'll go ahead and show you in the next tweet here in a second. But let's go ahead and take a look at these cards. 7 mana 4/7 Demon, that is a warrior demon hunter card. That is right, they're bringing back dual class cards, and there are a lot of really impressive cards on this list that are dual class, but it is a 7 mana 4/7 Demon. Very important to take notice there. Taunt Lifesteal costs 2 less for each weapon that you've equipped this game. So if you've already played a 2-mana weapon, this is a 5-mana 4/7 Taunt Lifesteal minion. And Warrior doesn't really have a lot of Lifesteal synergies. They mostly have armor synergies, so it's nice to see Warrior getting, some amount of healing that isn't just, slap a whole bunch of armor on your hero. But regardless, I think that this is just really cool synergies, because playing weapons actually has, like, a lot of capability right now, especially in Enrage Warrior. And this card could very easily slot in Enrage Warrior because it's a taunt and a lifesteal, and you're taking a lot of damage if you're not committing onto the board early on. So this can maybe give that deck a little bit of, mana cheat cards in order to just suddenly swing the game in their favor. I think that this has some potential, but the real card to keep an eye on is Through Fell and Flames, Through the Fire and Flames, for those of you who don't know. But give a minion rush, finale +1/+1. I don't really care about the finale, because the thing I kind of like about this card is that, you just spend all of your mana, and then suddenly you play this as a finale. +1/+1 can be, important in the early game. But what about this combo right here? What if you give this to Lady Setheno, and then Hellevaria, since after a friendly rush minion attacks, this thing now has rush. So for every single spell that you're playing with this, you are now, giving your entire board +1/+1, including the Lady Setheno. So the the nerf to Predation, you could argue whether or not it was justified, but now its nerf is going to feel completely irrelevant if Demon Hunters are still playing cards for 0 mana and killing us for like 80 a billion kajillion damage. Like, it's kind of ridiculous how insane this combo is when you really think about it. And when you have cards like Fizzle that can keep, like, you know, giving you even more spells and 0 mana interactions, this is definitely a scary thing that I am personally going to be wary of. Let's take a look at some of the other neutral cards before we start getting into what Elite Tauren Champion can do. But Magatha, Bane of Music. Draw 5 cards, give any spells drawn to your opponent. This card, the first thing I immediately thought of was Menagerie Warrior, actually, because that deck really only has, I think Roaring Applause is like the only spell, and then everything else is just minions and weapons. And it says specifically spells, so if you draw weapons or if you draw hero cards, you're not going to give them over to your opponent. It is strictly spells, so I'm kind of interested in how this card can work in Wild in particular. But the biggest thing to keep in mind is that it's a 5-mana, 5/5, draw 5. Like, that is an insane boost of cards by turn 5 if you're an aggro deck and you don't care too much about the spell requirement. So this legendary has a lot of potential in my eyes. However, one card I'm not really that sold on is this right here. Like, yeah, it's got tradable, so it's infinitely better than what it could be. But a 4-mana 4/4 Battlecry enemy spells cost 2 more. This is essentially, you know, a baby Loatheb. But the thing I'm really worried about with this card is that if you're playing it on turn 4, you better already have position of the board. Otherwise, this card is just going to be strictly bad. Because the one thing I'm worried about is if you play it in the late stages of the game, you're still not stopping cards like, you know, Whirlpool, big AoEs from the Priest. You still can't stop a Brawl unless you play this card before turn 6. Like, I'm a little bit worried about how this card is exactly going to slot in because I don't know what I would want to take out for a card that's debatably, you know, not always going to be what I want it to be because it's no Loatheb. And then you have a card like Grimtotem Buzzkill. This is a card I am definitely intrigued by, as I, for some reason, can't make it full size. But discard a weapon to draw 3 cards. This is kind of synergizing with the Magatha Bane of Music as well, because it's just, you know, for a deck that doesn't play any spells, you now have these minions that can discard specific cards you maybe don't care about as a way of, you know, gaining tempo and giving yourself a bunch of card draw. And the one thing I'm particularly worried about is that since these cards are neutral, you know, decks like Rogue, decks like Demon Hunter, maybe even Druid, like decks that can really cycle themselves are going to have even more cycle, but building the perfect deck with the, you know, the perfect amount of spells and minions mixture maybe is going to be the key to unlocking some kind of degenerate deck because of these neutral draw tools. And then you have cards like Remixed Musician, very similar to the other card we were just looking at, the weapon. But this is another card I'm a little bit concerned about just because of this right here. Hello, Rush Poisonous for 3 mana. This is just kill a minion for 3 mana a lot of the time. And then if you look at the other options, like, it's just kind of insane how good Rush is as a keyword if you slap it on to, like, you know, a Poisonous minion, a Divine Shield minion, a Lifesteal minion. This is essentially a mini Ziliax in some cases. And then you have Rush Wind Fury. That is just good on so many different ways, and let me just go ahead and explain a few of them. You have Double Trade, you have Value Trade, essentially like a mini Ziliax where you get rid of a minion and heal yourself in the process. You have Rush Poisonous, which I don't think I need to explain how good that is. And then you just have, you know, Divine Shield Rush where you just maintain board. Like, imagine this in like a hand buff deck of some kinds where you can like make this into like a 3-mana 5/5 or something, like Paladin or whatever. I think this card might have a lot of potential. And looking at the cards that were just released when I woke up this morning, we have dual class cards with Hunter and with Death Knight. Oh man, dude, this is a little bit of a weird situation for me because I love Death Knight and Hunter is technically my least played class, so I gotta be able to judge these cards on both classes. But honestly, in both classes, they kind of seem insane. You have trigger a friendly death rattle twice. Hello. With Undead Synergy. This card is probably going to be insane in Hunter in particular, but I have some ideas on how to make this work in Death Knight that will be coming up in the tweets up ahead. But then you have a Hollow Hound, which works extremely well in Hunter because, you know, it's Lifesteal, it's Rush, it kills 3 minions, it's undead, and it's a beast, and you can also bring this back with the 8-mana Hunter Legendary card. But in any case, dude, like, this is just an insane amount of tempo, and the fact that you can bring this card back really gives big Beast Hunter some big, you know, synergies. And maybe, like, cheating this out with the Saber can be really good if you do it by, like, turn 4, turn 5. I don't know. This card just screams really good to me. But in Death Knight, I'm not really so sure because I don't really know what this is slotting into. Like, yeah, you can put this in Blood DK, but it's a really slow card in those kind of decks unless you're, like, solidified in the early game. So I'm not really too sure about Hollow Hound in Death Knight, but in Hunter, it's looking pretty nutty. And the secret, honestly, is pretty insane, too, depending on how the summon works with the phasing of this card. So it's like, when your opponent ends their turn with no mana, summon a random 3-cost minion. If it summons the minion on your turn, so that way it has summoning sickness, then maybe this card isn't as good. But if this is a thing where it's like, as soon as your opponent ends their turn, before you draw your card, it summons, like, you know, a King Mukla and Wild, for example, because I can't think of a better 3-mana card, but it summons a 5/5 that can immediately attack. This is a little bit, you know, scary because Hunter Secrets have always been notorious for, well, there's a lot of check marks that I have to complete, and if this is just, you know, played on turn 2 and I don't have a 3-drop, then I might get punished for it. Let's look over some of the synergies with some of these cards that you might be having your eyes on, like Elite Tauren Champion. How exactly are we going to make this card extremely valuable? Well, outside of maybe just playing this against like a slower deck that has really hard times of playing for full mana cost because they might run out of resources, for example, they might just end up taking the 8 damage, so there is that. But there might be times where you just want to immediately pop off the damage, so what if you were to pop this off with like a Professor Meltronix, and then they can't spend their cards properly, and then suddenly, boom, they just take the damage. Like, I think this might have some real capabilities in Demon Hunter in particular, and also because Demon Hunter has a 1-mana hero power, it may not sound like that crazy on paper, but being able to, you know, evenly distribute your mana with that 1-mana hero power can sometimes be a big difference. Or what if, you know, you just turn your opponent's cards into health instead of mana, so that way they can't actually fulfill the requirement. And you can honestly do this at any time, because if you're playing a game of hot potato and your opponent doesn't want to actually pop it off yet, you can be like, too bad, it's happening this turn. So this card might honestly have gotten some big stonks in Warlock, potentially. But what about some Death Knight combos? Did anybody order a Yelling Yodeler with Cagehead? Hello, this is something that I'm really looking forward to right now. Because say you combo it with a Bone Lord Frost Whisper, you can essentially play this card for 0 mana. You can potentially hero power with Core Guide immediately. Then you can play, you know, Death Growl and copy the Death Rattles potentially to where if you trigger it twice, you might be able to summon a bunch of minions. Now, I haven't thought this combo 100% all the way through because that is like the Omega high roll, but this is just like the basic combo to keep your eye on because this by itself is already 18 damage. Maybe there's a way to turn this into like an OTK where the damage is just absolutely insane, but good lord, this with Cagehead is like one of the first things I was thinking about, and then when I saw Meaty post about it, it's like, hold on a minute, what is this man cooking up here? But some other combos to keep in mind is what if you just, you know, combo it with a Bone Shredder, for example, where you can distribute, what exactly does this card do again? I had to double check the effect because I completely forgotten what this card's effect was. But spend 5 corpses to trigger and gain the death rattle of a random friendly minion. So now there's even a better way of being able to do this instead of the combo that I was suggesting, because this will automatically trigger the 9/9 immediately and then you pop it off again for even more damage. So this is already a 9 mana 27 damage combo, but you already have to play the Cagehead and have it die, so you've already had a bore hit phase, hopefully, with this sort of combo, and the fact that it also has Taunt means that, you know, even if you don't deal OTK damage, you can still set up a gigantic wall. So Unholy DK is looking like it's got some real potential to hopefully go away from this aggro synergy that's just been dominating since we don't have that many cards yet. But one thing that I also want to keep an eye on is its synergies with Frost DK. If you guys didn't like a bunch of Frostworm Furies, then too bad. Because the way that this will work is that simply just by having a Horn and the Frostworm Fury in hand, you can immediately on turn 8 play Lady Death Whisper with this card and get 8 mana immediately to play the Frostworm Fury immediately, and then you have 3 more just sitting in hand. Lady Death Whisper stonks might have just gone up massively, and I'm really hoping that this is going to be the way the deck gets played, because I'm really kind of tired of how Frost DK is just all-in aggro, and then Unga Bunga 10 damage for lethal. But in any case, I really think that this has a lot of potential in order to give a slower Death Knight some real sustainability, man. Like, if you go up against an aggro deck, you're just gonna destroy them, right? But those are the synergies that I am most excited about with the cards that have been revealed so far. And again, we still have some other cards that are coming out, so I'm probably going to make another video highlighting those cards when I figure out what to do with them, because that's why I didn't want to just make a video immediately on ETC, because I need to look at some of the other cards and, of course, check Twitter. I check Twitter so you guys don't have to, right? And deliver some cool combos that might excite you about these cards versus just like, oh, this is weird, this is just such a bad card, why would Blizzard print this? Well, these combos are the reason why, and I'm really excited to start playing with these new cards with the mini set Audiopocalypse. Hopefully you guys enjoyed these synergies that might scare you a little bit or might excite you a little bit, and we'll see you for the next video.